Well, joining me now is the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you, Adesua.
I think a good place to start this conversation would be your right of reply to Senator Ali Ndume, because you are basically the author of this tax reforms bill. Your committee birthed these bills that have been sent to the National Assembly. You've had conversations with different groups and consultations with the governors, the lawmakers, but when you listen to Senator Ali Ndume say, you're in a hurry, why are you such in a hurry that, there needs to be consultation on this bill? What do you say to him? And one wonders, have you been able to identify the grounds of these governors and lawmakers, particularly from the North, who are pushing back against these bills?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me start by saying that Senator Ali Ndume is a highly respected senator, lawmaker. So we do respect his views and perspectives. And of course, he's not the only one. He's also speaking on behalf of other interested stakeholders who have some concerns. And we think that raising those issues are indeed necessary and desirable for a robust system at the end of the day. It allows us to be able to debate and then ultimately have the best outcome for the country. So it's good, it's positive. I had the privilege of leading a team of more than 100 Nigerians, including over 40 students from 22 universities, including head of internal revenue services from the 6 geopolitical zones, including over 20 government institutions, including trade associations, and the list goes on and on. Intentionally, the composition of the team was made to be representative, diverse, and inclusive, so we don't leave anybody behind, because you can't understand people's perspectives if you are not wearing their shoes. So we ensured that we have that. And the other thing we did was, beyond that, we also had intentional engagement with different sectors, over 40 of them, including Nigerians with disability, including farmers, including Nigerians in the diaspora. So we did all of that. Beyond that, we also had one engagement with the Governors Forum.
Yes.
We then wrote to the Governors Forum to say we want to visit at least 6 governors in their states. And we chose 1 governor per geopolitical zone, so we could go to their states, sit down with them and their cabinet and discuss. In addition to that, we had 2 engagements with the National Economic Council. We had almost a whole day session with the finance commissioners across Nigeria. We've had 4 sessions with the head of the internal revenue services from all the states in Nigeria at different times. So, of course, I recognize that consultation is important. I think it's not a process that has an end. Even after enacting the laws, you need to continue to consult. So we welcome any opportunity to further consult. So in putting these bills together, we were very mindful of where we are today as a country. So there are issues around government revenue and how we are funding our budget. We spent the past few years in the last administration printing Naira, which is part of why we're having inflation today, and it's pushing people into poverty, and low-income earners are struggling to survive. You need to address that problem. We also are in a position today where small businesses are having to deal with over 60 taxes. Large businesses, many of them are winding down, some are exiting completely. So we can't fold our arms and just hope that everything will be fine. Actually, I think the time we find ourselves now calls for that urgency of intervention. The best time to cut tax rates, to reduce tax burden, to make Nigeria attractive for investment, to encourage small businesses to grow, to protect the most vulnerable people, to exempt low-income earners and minimum wage earners from taxes, is today, not tomorrow. So it shouldn't even wait any longer, because there's a sense of urgency at this time. Indeed.
So in all of these conversations, were you able to identify why anybody will push back? I mean, highlighting what you have just reeled out, why will anyone be against the tax bill, particularly the Nigeria tax bill, which consolidates at least 7 bills. I understand about between 5 and 7 bills have been consolidated into the Nigeria tax bill.
About 11.
About 11, which is one of the 4. But this Nigeria tax bill also has the controversial VAT, as I know. So why is it so controversial? What are you trying to change that is so difficult? And Senator Ali Ndume did mention during that conversation that you said you're coming for the big men. Could that be a reason?
So we didn't say we are coming for the big men. We said that the big men need to pay a little bit more. Because if you are exempting minimum wage earners up to about 80,000 naira per month will be completely exempted. Then people earning about 1.5, 1.6 million naira per month or less, we see a reduction in their personal income tax, excuse me, and PAYE. If you do all of that, and you do nothing to the guys who earn 100 million naira, 200 million naira, you're going to create more problem for government revenue. And when we cannot fund government finances, we have to then borrow or print naira, and that creates another problem. Even for the richest people that we said should pay a little bit more, it's still one of the lowest rates in the world. If you are paying 25%, personal income tax rates after earning about 100 million naira per month, you shouldn't complain, because if you were in the US or UK or even South Africa or Kenya, you'll be paying around 40%. So we're not coming for anyone. And for even big businesses, we are cutting their company income tax rate from 30% to 25%. That's significant. So the exemption and the reduction in taxes for individuals is going to cover about 90%, actually more than 90% of workers in both public and private sector. There is no better time to provide that relief to the Nigerian people than now. The exemption threshold we've created and proposed for small businesses would exempt 97% of small businesses from almost all the burdens of taxes, from withholding tax to VAT. Corporate income tax rate for now will be 0%. They won't have to worry about PAY because almost all the employees will earn less than the minimum threshold. So they need that relief. And then harmonizing taxes so there are few of them that are broad-based, easy to collect. And rewriting our tax laws that are, many of them are older than anybody living today, that is alive today. We can't continue to operate those laws. And also we have opportunities for our young people that we are not able to harness now because we have bad laws and bad policies. For example, to hire a Nigerian to work for you within the international business outsourcing procedures or processes is not attractive, so nobody will do that. So why don't we amend the law now so the young people can find work and earn foreign currency? So honestly, the issues that is creating, like, to your question, is really the VAT.
Yes.
Because our proposal is that I think many people are not familiar with what is being done currently. So as we speak today, VAT is distributed among states based on 20% derivation, 50% equality of states, and 30% based on population. That derivation of 20% is based on where remittances are made, usually head office locations. And for most companies, the large ones, their head offices are in Lagos. So Lagos gets that benefit to the disadvantage of almost every other state. We thought we should correct that. Then number two, you have states like Lagos and Rivers State that are in court already, trying to get the Supreme Court to pass a judgment that says VAT should be administered by states. The law should be enacted by the House of the Assembly of a State, and we know that will be chaotic. So why are they planning to do that? Because they feel that they are not getting enough for the contribution that they make. So we thought, correct the derivation so that it recognizes the consumption based on every state, and then allow every state to keep about 60% of their contribution so that nobody has the motivation to go and get a Supreme Court judgment that says VAT is now a state tax. That's the first thing. So the second thing is to ensure that the way we calculate that VAT derivation recognizes the contributions of every state, so that every state, in addition to getting more of what they contribute, we have the incentive to want to promote economic activities within their jurisdiction. I think the bottom line is, the way I see it, is there's the lack of trust even within government, between states and local government, between state and federal government. So that's why people, in my view, are just suspicious. They say, oh, is there something they're not telling us? So meanwhile, we're doing this, just trying to do what is best for the whole country, and we're not looking at any regions. We think everybody will benefit. Okay,
there are those who have brought up the issue of equity, which also your reform is trying to address. They cite issues such as the North isn't producing as much. They've been bedeviled by insecurity. Some people have even limited this conversation to alcohol consumption and destruction versus agricultural produce. So if you can explain that further to explain where the equity comes in here. And, you know, speaking to what you've just said, I wonder why Lagos even agreed. Lagos should be the one throwing tantrums, but Lagos agreed. Yet the North is not agreeing. But speak to that conversation about the equity. Where is the equity in all of this?
Yeah, I don't think it's about whether Lagos agreed. I think Lagos is just more understanding. Because for them, if you do the correction, they'll lose out. But if you increase the amount you share based on derivation, they get a bit of that back. So the impact of them should be moderate. But in terms of the equity, so again, this is why it's important to always speak to data.
Yeah.
So people would say, well, they don't allow alcohol in the North, they don't allow tobacco, and then they're sharing the VAT. But guess what? The contribution of tobacco, alcohol to VAT is less than 3%, just about 2-point-something%. So it's
very minimal.
It's minimal. That's the first point. The second point is when it comes to food, we have more food production coming from the North, and food is exempt from VAT. Our proposal is going to make it zero VAT, so you even remove any traces of VAT at all. But for us, we said, why are we recognizing the contribution of every state based on the VAT we've collected, rather than the production that they have made? So there's no law by the United Nations or anybody that says you must count the VAT. We're saying, why don't we count the value of the production? So that becomes the derivation, which we then use as a basis to share the VAT. And this is the most equitable and fair approach that you can even think of. Because take Benue, for example, they produce a lot of food. We said, don't charge VAT on food so that people can be able to afford it. Why do you then punish Benue for producing food for us to eat? If you get to a point where states are enacting their VAT law, Benue will be forced to put VAT on food, and all of us will be in trouble, particularly the poorest people. So we feel that the approach is going to help. And it's not correct when people say that there's no production in the North. That's not what the data is showing us. The largest items that contribute to VAT in Nigeria are telecommunication, you have cement, you have sugar. These items, soft drinks, these items are in most cases more heavily consumed in the North, more than even the South. You have a fair share of that distribution across Nigeria. So we don't want it to be a regional conversation because it is not. That's not what the data is showing us. But in addition to that, we have this 5% that we ask the federal government to cede to states. And we believe that can be available as a stabilization transfer to ensure that any state that has significant shortfall in their revenue as a result of our proposal can then be compensated from that stabilization fund.
In other words, the federal government takes 10% as against the
Instead
current 15% they're getting. But let me ask you, I mean, the bills passed second reading on the floor of the Senate today. It's not yet Uhuru. It's a long journey to go. What do you envisage as it enters the public hearing stage? Do you envisage a situation where perhaps you'll be forced to change what you anticipated for these bills? And no bill is really perfect. Given the pushbacks you've seen, are there aspects, sections of this law's bill that you can retweak? And what aspects would those be?
To be honest, we are not insisting on anything. We have no right or powers to even insist on anything. It is the powers of the lawmakers to make laws. We only just propose to them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we believe that we owe it to explain what we're trying to do, what we have proposed, and the basis for those proposals. That's why we're very happy and grateful to the Senate and the House of Representatives for giving us those opportunities to explain. At the end of the day, if they consider all the inputs and they think otherwise, we are okay with whatever final positions they come up with. We have spent significant amount of time with the private sector. We had a session last week with CFOs and tax consultants. We had over 3,000 people attended, and we did a survey after explaining the sessions to CFOs and the tax consultants, and the approval was 100%. So these are the most knowledgeable stakeholders when you talk about CFOs and the tax consultants, and they are very excited about these proposals. Okay. So you don't want to go against the will of the people when the reforms will help the majority of your citizens. I think anybody should embrace it. And if we need to explain anything, we're happy to do that. In 1 minute, because we need to go. In terms of Naira and Kobo, because the bottom line is we are seeking to increase revenue in a structured, efficient way. So in Naira and Kobo terms, what is this reforms going to bring to Nigeria? And the most important question for any Nigerian is, how do you ensure that the revenue you generate from all of this is justified in spendings for the benefit of Nigerians? Yeah, so the primary objective for the reform is not to generate more revenue. More revenue will come as a consequence of a reform that allows economic activities to grow. Because we've created the environment, so there'll be more revenue. Exactly, yeah. So I don't want people to live with the impression of we're trying to extract more from them. We're actually reducing their tax burden. So at the end of the day, our expectation is that by fixing all those problems, including wasteful incentives, the ones that are even distortionary, if you take all of that away, you preserve your revenue, and then you allow businesses to grow, and then you can create more revenues in the process. So if you want to put numbers to it, the target we have is we move from around 10% of tax to GDP ratio today to about 18% over the next 2 to 3 years. And if you want to put that into Naira terms, you are looking at taxes in the region of 45 to 50 trillion Naira a year in terms of what we should get to. And that will help us reduce the budget deficit and be able to finance infrastructure. And to the other part of your question, we also have a national fiscal policy that now outlines how we should spend our money, ensuring that we prioritize what is most important to our people, particularly the reason why they're in multidimensional poverty, which is health, education, living standard, employment, and security. So we've made that communication very clear to the governors, Mr. President, the ministers, and we're working a framework now to even transform our budget so it focuses on what is most important to our people. So people should get value for their money going forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. We do appreciate your time. We know it's been a busy one for you, making all these consultations and conversations.